David?
Thanks, Carl. We're also following tech, of course, as we've said. Facebook is sliding this morning. Stock on pace for what would be its third straight monthly drop. That would be the first time ever, by the way. Here's what Facebook's former chief security officer, Alex Stamos, told MSNBC last night.
Mark cares a lot about his reputation, the reputation of the company. And I think that's actually one of the benefits of having a founder-led company is he is not responsive to the short-term whims of Wall Street. Because the truth is the things Facebook's going to have to do is going to cost a lot of money. They're going to make less money from growing slower, and they're going to spend a lot of money fixing these problems. And so I do think that they're engaged on it. The real question is can they move fast enough with the bad guys?
This, as CEO Mark Zuckerberg takes up a, quote, warlike stance to fight critics. That, according to stories over the weekend, including one on the Wall Street Journal. Joining us now, corporate governance expert Betsy Atkins, also founder and CEO of Baja Corp, and former Facebook advisor Moselle Thompson. Thanks to you both for being with here. Betsy, let me start with you. You sit on a number of public boards. If you were on the Facebook board right now, what would you be paying the most attention to? What would you sort of see as your responsibility given the winds that it finds itself swept up in right now?
Well, to be a good board member, you need to depend on management. And there has to be trust and there has to be transparency. And there hasn't been a lot of that because the report is that when the Russian interference was presented to the board, management was angry. They didn't want the board to know. So that's a concern. And I think there's also a dynamic where you have a lot of power, where you have a brilliant founder who's the CEO, who's the chairman, and who has 60% voting control. Those are a little bit troublesome. So I think the board dynamic of trust and transparency is pretty critical to do the right oversight for the shareholders.
Moselle is somebody who was an advisor to the company some time back, of course, an FTC commissioner. The possibility of increased regulatory scrutiny certainly is one reason why perhaps investors are selling. What's your thought? Is Facebook trying to sort of walk that fine line by doing the right thing, but also avoiding what may be coming in terms of the regulatory front?
Well, I think one of their challenges is not focusing on the substance of fixing the problem that they have. We've seen a lot of press lately about the problems they've gotten into with spin, whether it's getting involved in the politics of what happens on the Hill. That, I think, should be secondary. What their real focus should be is what's their relationship with their users, because those are the people who they have to prove they provide value to. And if you look at what's happening on the Hill, well, there is definitely a need for privacy legislation. I called for that in 1999. But now we are in a different situation. You have companies who are incumbents, so you have to be very careful about what you're trying to legislate, because what you could inadvertently do is keep the incumbents entrenched and not create any playing field for other people to challenge them.
I mean, I guess, you say make sure you focus on the relationship with the users, Moselle. But they built a self-service advertising platform. They built this kind of free-for-all environment where they try and mitigate around the edges where they can on a reactive basis. I mean, do they have to tear it down and rebuild it to actually make sure that they have a safe enough platform that's going to forestall more strict regulation?
Well, I don't really think it's a free-for-all. One of the things that Senator Warner said was when he made comments about the Wild Wild West. The internet hasn't been the Wild West for a long time. And even back when I was a commissioner, I talked about this and saying that the laws that apply offline still apply online. The question is, how do you implement them? Okay? And we're looking at what the FTC does. I think that this is a place where Facebook needs to sharpen its pencil. It needs to be able to talk about how it essentially governs the advertising platform and to make that a little bit more transparent. I think that's very important for the users, but also the people who advertise on the platform.
Betsy is somebody who focuses on governance, and given you mentioned this already, the presence of a founder and somebody who controls the company in the form of Mr. Zuckerberg. What do you do here as a board member if you think change needs to happen, perhaps at the high executive levels?
Well, I think what you need to do is have management present to the board the case pro and con for embracing media regulation. You know, you could still take the rubles from the Russians, but you'd have to disclose it as special advertising. That's what magazines do. That's what newspapers do. They take money. And they take money for ads. And, you know, the more sensational, the more eyeballs, the higher the ad rate. And that's all great. You just have to comply and have a level playing field with the other media outlets, where they have to actually be sure that the facts are checked and that it's not fake news, that there isn't hate speech, and that if they take special advertising from political entities, they identify special advertising. So have that discussion with the board. Look at the pros and the cons and the business case. You know, when it's inevitable that you're going to be regulated, you're probably better served to actually have a strategy and a plan and not just be defensive and resist.
Yeah. And Moselle, you think they come out of this okay?
I think they still provide value. Don't forget, there are a lot of people who use it successfully, and what I'd like to see is that still exists for the majority of people who use the site. But this is also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the Hill. It's an opportunity for these companies to actually have a discussion with the public that's been really lacking about what's the reasonable use of data. That's something that our leaders, I don't care where you are, have really sidestepped. And instead of talking about the politics, let's talk about the substance of what users should expect.
Moselle and Betsy, thanks to you both. Appreciate it.
Dow down 230 with Boeing and Apple, the key laggards. We're back in a moment.